20. I couldn't believe it. Now we had a patch. Actually, we'd had one the whole time. I tried not to think about what would have happened if we'd known that on the first day, although when we set off on that footpath, we had no idea that we were going to wander so far from the river and get completely lost in the woods. I almost don't want to use it, I said, holding the sticker in my left hand while I used my absolutely disgusting towel to dry and clean the area of the tube where the puncture was. Alex struggled to even pull a face at me. We were that exhausted, plus she was injured. Please. I'll buy you another. Her speech was still syrupy, and now I had no idea if it was for the same reasons as before or because she'd hit her head. I used my ragged, dirt-caked fingernail to peel off the backing, and then I carefully placed the bumper sticker over the hole. I pressed it down and smoothed the sticker flat, so no air bubbles were left trapped between it and the plastic of the tube. You're a genius. Seriously. Alex beamed with pride. We'll just give it a minute to really stick. I don't know how strong bumper sticker adhesive is or whether it's waterproof. I do know that it's pretty hard to peel it off actual bumpers, which is why my parents have never allowed us to put stickers on our car. What if you stop liking that slogan? Mom always asks. Sometimes that's a ridiculous question, though. I'm never going to stop liking the environment. Or the Wisconsin Badgers. Or wolves. Still, I worried this sticker wouldn't stay put and we'd start leaking air on the river. Then I remembered what else was in Alex's bag. Hand me the nail kit? I asked. Is this really the best time to tweeze off ticks? Alex countered, although she reached for her bag anyway. Nope, I said as I took the pouch from her. I unzipped it to pull out the bottle of clear, glossy polish. Whenever my mom gets a run in her tights, she uses nail polish to cover the hole so it doesn't get worse. So I did the same, covering the sticker with polish to reinforce its hold. I guess you really were just being prepared, I said, by bringing all this stuff along. I take back my snarking. Alex smiled, still looking proud. When I'd coated all the edges of the sticker, I capped the bottle and sat down. How long does that stuff take to dry? It's quick, but I always give it at least 8 minutes. We waited for what felt that long, although who knows if our sense of time was anywhere close to accurate anymore. We can reinflate it now, I said, after running my fingertip over the shimmering polish, which felt smooth and dry. The inner tube, even though it was a heavy-duty one that the tour place had filled with a bike tire air pump, still had one of those plastic valves that you can use to inflate by mouth. Being big enough for two, ours was going to take an awful lot of breath to fill up. And we both had been breathing kind of funny, like we were only capable of taking in shallow sips of air. We'll take turns. I flipped the latch off the valve and put my mouth on it, tasting a hint of minerally river water. I inhaled through my nose, deeply as I could, then started blowing, hard as I could, into the tube. My breath didn't even create a ripple in the thick plastic. I paused, covering the valve with my finger, and took in another breath. Then I sealed my mouth onto the valve again and pushed all my air out, until my stomach squeezed and it felt like I was going to collapse inward, like a deflating parade balloon. Repeat. 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 I kept going until my head spun. If I hadn't been sitting down on a wet log, I would have fallen over. Your turn. I could barely whisper. Alex made it through only 2 exhalations before she clamped her finger over the valve and dropped her head between her knees. Without a word, I replaced her finger with mine and started again. With that bump on her head, maybe she shouldn't be exerting herself. And her lips were still so swollen, it must have hurt to use them. The tube began to rise up, slightly. We can do this, I thought. It'll just take some time. When the tube was about half full of air, I had to stop for a rest. I felt so dizzy I thought I might throw up. And I was dying of thirst too. Whether it was a good idea or not, I inched over to the edge of the river and scooped water into my cupped hand for a drink. I didn't think I could keep inflating the tube without it. Alex insisted on taking another turn, but then she started coughing and couldn't stop. She hunched over, wheezing. Her face was cherry red. You're done, I said. She tried to shake her head no, but that only made her cough harder. I wheezed in another breath and pressed my lips back around the valve. Even the gross taste of plastic made me hungry. I kept going until the tube was about 3/4 full, It had the round shape of a donut again, but like one that had gotten smushed in the box. If I pressed on the side of the tube, the plastic would sink. It wasn't firm and buoyant like it should be. But I couldn't bear to breathe into it any longer. My head ached, and so did my lungs. I felt like I was about to pass out. The question was, could we still float on the tube? It only needed to keep us above water, like a raft. Hopefully it was filled enough. Let's try it now, I panted to Alex. She made a little nod, still holding her head, and reached for her tote bag, trying to drag it closer to herself. Her arm lacked the strength to swing it up to her lap. I rubbed at my eyes. The tube's not going to hold us and all our stuff, I said. Too much weight. We have to leave everything behind. Everything? Alex mumbled. I nodded, biting down on my lip to stay focused. I picked up my backpack and set it on a large U of flat rock a few feet from the river's edge. I didn't even bother to unzip it and look, one last time, at what was inside. Just my camera, which was dead anyway, and the wrappers of the energy bars and bug wipes and bandages. My water bottle. The used-up tube of sunscreen. The empty mini first aid kit. I kicked off the sole surviving flip-flop and unwound the fabric from my other foot. I even untied my towel skirt and dropped it next to the backpack. I hated leaving our stuff in the forest. You're supposed to carry out what you carried in. Maybe, after we made it to safety, someone could bring us back to this spot so we could collect our things. I could recharge my camera then, and finally see if my wolf sighting had been real after all. Alex handed me her tote, and I placed it next to the pile of my belongings. She pulled off her towel too. Then she raised her arms and worked her way out of the sweatshirt, handing it to me. I held it in my hands, then pressed it to my chest, like I was hugging it goodbye. It was such a dumb thing, feeling sad about leaving a sweatshirt behind. For a moment, I considered putting it on. How much weight would it really add? But that would be foolish. We needed to be as light as possible if we wanted a chance of floating to safety. A sweatshirt would soak up heavy water. The only thing we could carry with us was the life vest, because that was itself a flotation device, and who knows if we'd need it to save our lives. I folded it up and placed it next to my backpack, tracing the outline of the wolf one last time. Lupin lover. Dorky, yes, but I still loved that sweatshirt. I would also be okay without it. Next to me, Alex was saying goodbye to her phone. She pressed the home button one last time and then lovingly set it on top of my sweatshirt. It was oddly comforting that our two prized possessions were sticking together. Okay, let's go. I picked up one side of the tube and Alex took the other. We slowly waded into the river. The water swirled around our ankles. Even though the sun was out again, we'd never warmed back up. My legs were already numb to the frigid temperature. We walked until the river came up to our thighs, when the current began tugging at us. Even though we both were holding tight, we were barely strong enough to keep the tube from floating away. Do you think you can climb on? I asked. Alex nodded. I tightened my grip on the tube. I'll hold it steady. 1, 2, 3, go. She grabbed the edges and wiggled her way on top. The tube squeaked and sank an inch deeper into the water. Once Alex was in the middle part, I took a breath, then jumped to hoist myself up and over the edge. Without my feet planted on the riverbed, the current immediately snagged the tube and pulled us into the downstream flow. I wasn't quite on. My hands clung to the side of the tube, but my lower body was adrift in the river. I squirmed, struggling to kick my way up. With me dragging one side down, the tube began to take on water. Help! I glanced at the bumper sticker, still stuck on tight but with the waterline creeping closer to it. If the sticker fully submerged, it might fall off despite the nail polish sealing it to the plastic. Then we'd capsize. Would we be strong enough, then, to fight the current? If not, would the one life vest be enough to save us both? Alex grabbed my elbows and yanked me upward. I kicked furiously, then pulled my knees up to my chest, until finally I was inside, curled up in the puddle of the sunken middle of the inner tube. We were barely afloat but still moving swiftly with the current. I glanced back at the spot where we'd entered the water, and I watched the neat little pile of our belongings fade. It was another cairn, marking that we'd been there. That we'd made it out of the woods. Then suddenly the cairn was out of my view, and it was just us, alone with the river.